by the Doshisha University that Professor Philip is now teaching. But today I have a business trip to Tokyo, so I am joining this wonderful conference in Tokyo.
Well, it's great that you could join us. And
Watanabe-san, sorry, if you could get a little closer, or your microphone is a little quiet.
How about this?
Much better. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call everybody back in from the coffee break and we will start your session. Okay, please give me one more minute.
I'm sorry today, but good morning, everybody, and Professor Han and Dan and Tamako-san, and I'm Haruyoshi, and I'm Professor of Finance, and I'm very honored to participate in this session, and thank you for leading, Hana-san.
Thank you so much for joining us. And as was mentioned before in kind of the outline, it'll just follow, a brief introduction by myself, and I will have a brief introduction for each of you, and then I will have each of you provide a presentation. I know Professor Ito provided a lot.
I know a lot.
So
I understand.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, 12 minutes, right? Yeah. You remind me in 10 minutes, then I summarize in 2 minutes after you remind me.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. And I think that'll also give us some time for questions.
Sure.
I did prepare some, but it sounds like from the first session, a lot of people in the audience have questions as well. So maybe we could take a few questions from the audience and make this as active and dynamic as possible.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think the last announcement was because they're doing simultaneous interpretation.
Yeah, I have.
We're going to, yes, I will also try to speak slower so that we can.
I tended to speak faster, yeah, but
Wonderful.
And so they are coming back gradually, so maybe we're going to start in a couple of minutes.
I wish I was there in person.
Oh yeah,
hopefully,
I
yes.
used to.
Okay, so I would like to actually kick off our next session and introduce our panel to you very quickly. So we're very fortunate to have Hana speaking to us from Korea today. We also have Dan speaking to us from Tasmania, and Watanabe-san, Tamako, is actually in Osaka today. You're muted, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I am now in Tokyo.
In Tokyo, okay. And we actually have Professor Ito Haru, who is actually from Tokyo, Aoyama Gakuin, here in Kyoto. Yeah. So you've switched places. Hi.
Great to see you. Yeah, thank you much.
So Hana, I will turn it over to you. So your panel has 1 hour. So we've had some amazing discussions so far. So really looking forward to this panel. So you are officially on.
Okay, thank you so much to Philip, Professor Sagai, for inviting me and for putting this panel together. And congratulations to Philip and the team for the amazing work that you've done. I was fortunate to listen to the first session for today as well. And I think there are a lot of connections that we can make between the first panel and then trying to kind of actualize that in a kind of practical setting. It's all practical, but specifically for finance. By way of introduction, I'm Hana Jun. I'm Associate Professor of International Business at IWA's Graduate School of International Studies. I'm also the Director of our Center for Global Social Responsibility and the Major Director for our International Business Program at IWA. I also previously worked in equity research at Lehman Brothers and also Nomura Securities. And that's actually when I started first hearing about sustainability, when I was working in semiconductors and IT, and kind of what role they potentially play when it comes to investment decisions for investors and also for management decisions for corporations. So today, for this second session, we're going to try to extend that discussion on value, the way we think about it, and not just in terms of financial returns, but we're also looking at some of the social, environmental, and systemic changes that we can measure. And also importantly, maybe those things that we aren't able to measure as of yet. So we're fortunate to have with us three panelists introduced by Philip briefly, and they bring a powerful mix of perspectives to today's panel. So one offers very deep academic expertise to ground our thinking. One also bridges academia and industry, so we're able to kind of connect theory and realities of the market. And then one brings insights of a think tank working side by side with practitioners and trying to tackle challenges on the ground. And so some of the questions that are going to anchor this panel include, when we move beyond purely financial metrics, how do we define and measure what truly matters? And how can finance become a catalyst for solving and not just funding social and environmental challenges? So we hope to have some sharper answers and a great discussion by the end of this hour. And I'd like to introduce each of our three panelists. First, we have Professor Ito Haruyoshi, who joins you in person. So he's the favorite for today. He is Professor of Finance at Aoyama Gakuin University, and he will talk about double materiality versus single materiality, issues in impact measurement, and issues with sustainable financial products and their impact on society. We also have with us Professor Dan Dougard, who joins us, I think, today from New South Wales. And he's Associate Professor of Finance at the Tasmanian School of Business and Economics. He will talk about his area of expertise in ESG investing, Indigenous sustainable finance, the use of sustainability data in investment decision-making, and how the concept of value is defined, measured, and potentially legitimized when we move beyond purely financial returns. And last but not least, joining us from Tokyo today is Ms. Watanabe Tamako, and she is Senior Specialist of Impact Business Creation at the Japan Research Institute. And she has been working on establishing new social systems and realizing cutting-edge businesses in Japan and overseas to help solve social issues by not only thinking, but doing as professionals. And so we're very excited to have all three of you today, despite your busy schedules. And first, may I ask Professor Ito for your presentation.
And thank you, Professor Hanna, for the great reading and great introduction. And once again, I'm Haruyoshi Ito. I'm the first speaker of this session, and I would like to talk about the discussing finance and from the perspective of single versus double materiality. And actually, I have many slides, so 47 slides. So maybe I don't have enough time to cover all of them. So if you're interested, this is uploaded to the Google Drive. So please download it and have it in your hands. Anyway, so the time is limited. So let me talk about the conclusion, my message first. So my message is very simple. So first of all, we have to define sustainability. So as you know, there are many corporations, especially in Japan, is trying to disclose many sustainability information and so try to measure the impact. That's appreciated, but however, they just disclose information. For example, if I have IR, officer of the corporation, why do you disclose such many information? Just because investor asked them to do so. But without any strategy, without any purposes, so this kind of information disclosure doesn't make sense to me. So any purposes should be okay, but as you see, today the value isn't. So all of them have the different values. And so the personal value or corporate value, so any values is okay, but at least they have to define the purpose of the corporation, purpose of sales. So usually we have two strands of the purpose, like single materiality or double materiality. So as you see, single means financial, economic impact only, but double means that financial plus impact materialities. So once again, any of them is fine to me, but we have to define either ways. So if single, the sustainability means that as long as it's creating economic return or financial return, we pursue sustainabilities. If double, it means that we have to pursue both financial impact, no matter impact is related to the financial returns or not. So in this case, actually, if I use the economic terms, this is called the utility. So our utility function have both financial return and social impact or sustainability impact. So in that cases, so if you feel happy from the social impact or good impact to society, then it means that we are willing to compensate the financial return by pursuing the social impact or economic, social impact. So in this case, we have to measure how much financial return should be compensated. So this is one of the interest topic. We call it WTP, willingness to pay. Maybe this term might be used in the marketing literatures. So we have to discuss how much return can be compensated to pursue impact. So I will discuss some of the literature later on. And also, some of you maybe already talk about, so not only the maximization of some object function, but also we have to think about constraints, so we call optimizations. So many standards talking about the do no significant harm principle, the DNSH principles. So in this case, even though we pursue, for example, something good for the environmental thing, actually we should not forget about the human rights or that kind of social aspects. And also, like the Hilp Sensei mentioned, so the whose value care, so ourselves or yourselves. So we should not destroy the others' values. So we should concern about the stakeholder or other people's values. So this could be some of the constraints. And also, actually, I visited Harvard Business Schools for a week, and from the end of July to beginning of August. And actually, they mentioned that 3 lenses. So that is economic lenses, financial returns, and second one is the legal lens. So we have our actions, our activity is not illegal, but also we should minimize the risk of the suit by anyone else. The third lens is ethical lens. So by considering, we can satisfy all of these 3 needs. So this is the sustainability of the corporations. So maybe one of the framework we can consider. So that's what I wanted to talk today. Okay, any type of object function could be fine with me from my sales wealth level or shareholder value or corporate values. And if I say the utility levels, so in the case of the volatility, so once again, utility should include both the wealth levels and the sustainability. So we should feel happy from both of them. But at the same time, if we think of long runs, so these sustainability things might affect our wealth levels if we take the long run. For example, like sea level rise, so it means that if the sea level rise, so we cannot leave some of the prices, so the land price might be going down. Also, maybe if the temperature keep going, and maybe human beings cannot live anymore. So in this case, our wealth level can be damaged because of sustainability. So in this case, actually, this is the single materiality. We concerned about the wealth level only, but sustainability affects these wealth levels. So so we have to define our utility function just considering the wealth levels, but which is related to sustainability, or no matter sustainability related to wealth level or not, we have to concern both of them. Then we have to determine what kind of thing we are going to do. Then we can understand what kind of measurement we might need. In case of double materialities, so we concern about sustainability things, but also we have concern about the stakeholder of the others. Okay, so if you're considering national level or global level, so the values should be the sum of all of the utility levels. But at the same time, if we have the constraint, I skipped this constraint, but if we do not want to, destroy the others' utility levels without compensating other utility level, we call Pareto optimal. So the constraint should be the current utility levels. So that's what we want to process at the national or global levels. But once again, so if the single materiality basis, so we have to just care about the base levels. Then as long as this is related to sustainability, we concern sustainabilities. So we have to, once again, we have to define this kind of purpose. Then we have to determine what kind of sustainability we will pursue. So once again, so many corporations in Japan might forget about these object functions. So my message is simple. So we have to think about object function. We have to define object function. Then we understand what to do. So actually, luckily we have the mathematics session in the very beginning. So this kind of scientific approach is very important. So I would say this is final session might be natural for us. Okay, so maybe I have a couple of minutes to go. So let me talk about some topics related to my comments. So, so actually, I'm impressed by this case, Marriott Corporation, which I learned the last month at the Harvard Business Schools. So this is a kind of old case, which is happened in 1993. So Marriott Corporation, as you know, this is hotel industry, but they also have the art of real estate. Then they try to separate the corporation for the hotel service corporation and the real estate corporation. By doing so, Marriott Corporation stock price is going up by 575 million US dollars. But however, because the debt is transferred to the real estate corporations, so the debt value is actually depreciated because of the lower credit ratings. Then damage to the bondholder is minus 300 million US dollars. So in this case, do you like this kind of transaction? So actually, this kind of exercise might be very good exercise for the sustainability discussion as well. So as a corporate finance researchers, so for example, shareholder value maximization, obviously, yes, we have to go it. Also, if we consider corporate value maximization, so corporate value can be defined by the sum of the shareholder value and bondholders. Even though we have damaged the bondholders' values, corporate value should be improved by 275. But however, is it really good for the Marriott? Then, as I mentioned, the Harvard Business School using these three lenses. So economic lenses, no matter shareholder value maximization or corporate value maximization, this transaction might be good. But however, if we think about ethical values, so actually, should we get some values by damaging others' values? Probably not. So maybe introduction of this kind of ethical value might be important. But however, as the definition of ethical value is very difficult. So also ethics is depending on people's values. So this is actually we have to deeply discuss furthermore. So anyway, so just let me introduce this frameworks as of now. And also related to that kind of story, and there are many sustainable finance products is available all over the world. And one of them is called sustainability linked bond, which is firstly issued by the Enel, which is the Italian-based energy corporations. And this scheme seems to be attractive for me at the first glance because their target is 50% renewable energy capacities. And as of now, 49%. So they try to improve the renewable energy capacity by 6%. So if they achieve, the coupon rate is 2.65%. If they do not achieve, coupon rate will be going up by 2.9%. So it seems that they have some penalized if they do not pursue renewable energies. But however, do you think is it really good finance product? In other words, is it financially attractive? Is it this product give more incentive to have the social impact, the good social impact? The one of the key words is here is general purpose. So this bond is actually issued as a general purpose bond. In other words, not like the green bond. They can use the proceeds whatever they want. In other words, if the NL think that even though they pay higher interest rate, the pursuing the renewable energy capacities is costly. They have that option not to pursue sustainability or invest in the renewable like the solar panels or wind panels. So actually we have doubt about these general purpose perspectives. So you have doubt about the social impact. But also, it is financially attractive. So let me see the detailed calculation. But I would say this is not really financially attractive because we give some values. I mean, investor actually provides some benefit to the NLs. So because NL actually gets some benefit to pursue both of them, we call it real options. But this real option value is actually negative. It means that the value is transferred from the bond investors to the NLs. So actually, we have to really think about the really good sustainable finance product, which have the good financial return and good social impact. So that kind of thing should be considered. Okay, so time is limited. Okay, so let me give you some frameworks. So not like the mathematics, but let me give you some pictures. So left-hand side indicates that the people who just care about the corporate value or financial returns. So in this case, even though the financial return and social impact, like the measured by SDGs, is rated, the optimal level is red point. And right graph indicates that people who have the utility from both financial return and social impact. So in this case, the optimal level is now a little bit higher in social impact. That's the red point. So if we compare the right and left-hand side, the financial return is a little bit compensated, damaged, but we have more social returns if investors have the social have the utility from the social impact. But anyway, so this, in other words, this is the limitation of sustainable finance or market mechanisms. Even though investors have the utility from the social impact, so this point is the maximum impact we can give to the society. So if we want to have more social impact, we have to do something better to the society. In other words, this red point should be going up to the upside, y-axis side. Then we need some legal systems or some political system might be needed. Then, and actually there are many, information discourse systems. So as you see, the single materiality is based by IFRS or TNFD or whatever. And the variety is used by the European regulations. So in practical, stance, actually this is still the controversial issues which should be used. But anyways, no matter if it is single or doubles, we have to think about corporate value. So simply, corporate value can be described by that equation, cash flow divided by cost of capital minus the perpetual growth rate. Then the singular materiality based disclosure standard means that as long as the sustainability is related to either cost of capital or growth rate, we have to disclose that sustainabilities. So that's the meaning of single materialities. And the variety is based by the European based. So of course we have to think about these cost of capital and the social impact, but this is double material perspective. We have to think about the social impact. Actually, this is our discussion, how we measure the social impact literally. And also, let me talk about how the investors are the single or doubles. So this paper is talking about the impact investment by the venture capitalists. Interestingly, this is based on the US data. So they are actually willing to compensate some financial returns if that is impact. So how much return they compensate? 2.5 to 3.7% return can be compensated. Maybe you feel this is big, this is small. So it totally depending on your values, but this is the research sets. Then what kind of impact investor actually willing to compensate? If the theme is environmental, poverty, minority, and women, actually investor willing to compensate some financial returns. But the themes is a little different, like the social infrastructure, regional development, and SME funds. So investors are not willing to compensate these financial returns. And also, what kind of investors they are willing to compensate the returns? And the first one developing organization like the World Bank, maybe it's obvious. The second one, financial institution like the insurance company, banks. So these are also the institutions they are willing to compensate the financial return to pursue social impact. And last one, public pensions. And the other institutions are not really willing to compensate the financial returns, like the private pensions. So actually, I interviewed private pension managers. Actually, they are not really willing to compensate return because their social mission is to protect the wealth for the 20 or 30 years later for the employment after the retirement. And so this is what the research says. Okay. Then also, if you guys think about the measurement, for example, if the green bond is published and issued, actually stock price is going up, also interest rate lower. However, if we see the impact, so this in the dashed line indicates that how the carbon intensity is changed. So zero means that when they issue the green bond. So please see that dashed line. This is the median levels. So as you see, even though they issued the green bond, they promise to use that for the green purpose to make it have the green impact. But CO2 is not actually reduced. So that's what we have to concern. Also, as you see, the many corporations say that, okay, we want to reduce the CO2 like for 50% reduction by 2040 or 2050s. That might be okay. But however, if we think about global level, what we have to concern is not the percentage reduction, but the amount of CO2 reduction, amount of greenhouse gas reduction is important. In other words, the heavy, oh, okay, 1 minute, okay. And the energy industry or cement or iron industry, that's the heavy, CO2 emitters. So if they reduce just small percentage, that social impact is huge. But actually green bond market appreciates the higher percentage rather than the amount. So this paper says the counterproductive sustainable investment. So anyway, so we have to reconsider the measurement when we establish green financing. I'm sorry, time is up. So maybe I have time. Let me go back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ito, and apologies for cutting you off. I know there's so much more that we would love to hear, but just so that we can get our other two panelists in the discussion, then we would love to maybe circle back at some of your important points as well. So thank you again to Professor Ito, and now we'll move to Professor Dougard, Dan, all the way from New South Wales today, and please begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Hannah, for your kind introduction. And Philip, thank you for the introduction and for organising this very worthwhile, focused conference. And you can see this beautiful place that I live in, Tasmania. The big attraction for going there, of course, and coming from the city I'm currently sitting in of 5 million people, where I was a funds manager and looked after a large Masters of Applied Finance at Macquarie University, to then go to this beautiful place was to work alongside these sort of scientists. These are geologists, but also work alongside Antarctic researchers, climate change researchers, and the opportunity to do finance with them in their particular projects. And so that's the focus of the three papers I'll be drawing upon very briefly. The first one is all about financial and non-financial feasibility evaluation of some projects, which I think is back to getting our hands dirty in terms of the actual granular decisions that we've got to make as we actually put value around non-financial initiatives. And then secondly, specifically with Hannah, our friends from New Zealand, who has done a very in-depth study of this particular issue around Indigenous sustainable finance. And then thirdly and finally, returning to my roots, which is institutional investing, and talking about how universal asset owners is a context by which we can draw it all together in order to have big picture enterprise as well as systemic frames of reference to understand the trade-offs. And so as I said, the first paper that I'll focus on is specifically making non-financial values count and constructing ecological, cultural and social values in regard to finance as well as policies. And the core challenge is how to do this. And I have a lot of very specific examples, but I won't touch on them given we've accelerated our timing today. But it is worthwhile touching base with me if in fact you do encounter some of these specific challenges of how do you put a financial dollar number around the ecological protection of a particular environment, and how do you put a number around the impact that you're bringing to the cultural preservation of a particular community. And they're tricky questions, but they're good questions to actually delve into. But the relevance is if we don't measure them, they don't count. But more importantly than that, the culmination of many different natured initiatives with very different stakeholders and very different concerns. And so diving into why it matters, first off, the benefits are astounding. the non-financial benefits alongside some major projects. And the projects I include will be not just this building of a scientific laboratory in the west of the state, but also the state's investment in irrigation, not just for produce, but also the long-term resilience against climate change. But we do know that decision makers demand quantifiable and comparable evidence. And there's plenty of literature that shows us if we don't turn things into dollars or yuan, that things don't go ahead. And therefore, the decision makers need to see these numbers. And the big challenge is if you don't convert to numbers, you have the risk of important priorities being discounted or even totally ignored. And therefore, we need to take a little bit of a step back as we talk about valuation, because it's not a pre-existing fact out there to be discovered. It's not inherent in the activities. It is actually by way of social construct as we report numbers, as we evaluate the numbers, to actually form the processes by which we ascribe a dollar number to activities. And the frameworks that we've been working through have been inspired by trying to tick off three significant principles. And one is with respect to commensuration, making unlike things comparable in the same space, but giving recognition to performativity, that the metrics shape behavior, and whether it be in terms of incentives or just merely KPIs in terms of the executives, they matter how we form the numbers and how we prioritize and weight the numbers. And therefore, related to that is the incredible importance of the politics of establishing the metrics. And just a plug, therefore, for an upcoming special issue on the knowledge politics of sustainable finance coming up soon in the Journal of Cultural Economy. And I and my colleagues have an article submitted there. We might not make it into the patch, but the collection of articles is going to be very, very valuable to understand the interplay between getting to particular metrics as we then promote them and recommend them to policy, to regulators as well as individual companies. But the first paper that focuses on this real hands-on financial and non-financial feasibility project on the west coast of the island of Tasmania. And it covers marine conservation, Indigenous engagement, and community sustainability. And therefore, it became an opportunity by which we were able to draw upon the researchers who are doing the fish counts out in the ocean, but also the measures of carbon emissions and the indices they compile in terms of achieving biodiversity, which you might see in relation to biodiversity loans and lending by banks. But this is in the context of then attempting to combine those numbers alongside the other numbers, not just with respect to ecological priorities, but also alongside that, the Indigenous engagement of the communities across the West Coast, as well as the broader social environment of the communities there, and building their resilience to both economic challenges as well as obvious climate change impacts in the form of erosion and what will happen in terms of water levels. But as we explored how to ascribe numbers to all of these areas, very important things occurred in regard to Indigenous engagements, because it was an example by which, if we just revert back to the counts of things, the number of Indigenous youths who are trained with sustainability or getting jobs in ecologically responsible fishing industries, the counts dismiss or downplay the significant degree of cultural impact of creating economic empowerment for these communities. And therefore, a big point to note there was, as we bring non-financial into the reporting realm, the importance of maintaining a deep narrative around the significance of some of the initiatives and outcomes, and therefore the role of qualitative placement alongside the quantification of these values. Of course, that then creates this tension, doesn't it? The credibility that we get by converting things into numbers, but losing and dismissing some of the richness associated with projects. And so that's why we discovered the write-up was so much more important than just pure delivery of the numbers. It just as an aside, of course, we've managed to win the hearts of local government and state government, but now, unfortunately, it's one of the many political footballs occurring between federal government and state governments. And so we're yet to see how it plays out, even though we've got coordination of the underlying stakeholders. So it adds an additional dimension to the project and to being successful in communicating non-financial in regard to financial values. And therefore, just some final points on that paper. The metrics are powerful, but they are innately political, and therefore the inclusion or exclusion of some values over others then leads to pursuing political initiatives with regard to some parts of the community and then alternatively ignoring others. And therefore those points I said, combining numbers with narratives, the importance of co-designing the metrics because of the inherent weightings that occur when combining the metrics together, but finally the importance of a reflective approach to then subsequently reviewing and adapting the indicators to avoid unintended consequences and perverse incentives. So just as some notes on the Indigenous sustainable dimension and then the universal asset owners, we have come to be aware of the significant history associated with Indigenous communities already doing this. And far before we had our ESG metrics that I and others in industry have used to create environmental screens products for large institutional investors. And therefore, these sort of projects really give an opening of the eye to actually the wisdom that can come from hundreds of thousands of years being involved in trying to weigh up community priorities alongside especially ecological projects. It therefore emphasises the intertwining between stewardship, cultural identity, and this clever balancing that has occurred for so many hundreds of thousands of years in terms of economy, social and ecological priorities. And therefore, I do note that the ESG metrics I've used as a practitioner frequently miss the Indigenous community priorities in a wholesale manner, but also the incredible degree to which there's heterogeneity across Indigenous communities around the world, and therefore the ways in which we revise ESG metrics, even if we're just going to use those, differ depending upon the communities that we're attempting to engage with. And then finally, bringing things back to the big picture, I managed superannuation funds and pension funds that also had input on sovereign funds. And in that context, we do call them universal asset owners. And you would have probably seen the work by John Lukamek in regard to beyond modern portfolio theory and the way in which large institutional investors, by their incredibly diversified portfolio nature, have learned that they cannot kick the can down the road in terms of the externalities that occur in association with typically ecological exposures, but also social exposures and including Indigenous interactions. And I've learned that simply because if they divest out of the companies that then subsequently generate incredible harm through their externalities, there's interlinking between environment, social and financial and economic systems, and it comes back to hurt the portfolio and therefore those that they look after. And therefore, two things. One, universal asset owners are moving into this space in a very impressive manner that actually then points to them being potential exemplars of frameworks of combining financial and non-financial priorities and outcomes within their portfolios for the rest of us to learn from. So I hope you don't mind, Hannah. I tried to tighten it up and bring it together so as we can move on to our third and final guest. But thank you very much for the opportunity to outline some of these real hands-on experiences of non-financial values. Of course, that's the collection of articles, but I'll pull out of the sharing at this stage, okay?
Thank you so much, Dan. And that was perfect in terms of timing. Thanks to both of you. And it's a great segue to the work that Ms. Watanabe Tamako will be presenting for us today. And I was also informed by Philip, our Master of Ceremonies today, that we have a little bit of time. So he would like to finish perhaps at around 12:20 so that those offline will not starve and they will have some lunch together. So both Professor Ito as well as Professor Dougard, thank you so much for your timeliness, and I'll pass the microphone on to Ms. Watanabe.
Thank you, Hannah. I hope all of you can see my presentation. Oh, thank you so much, Dan. Hello, my name is Tamako. I am working in the Japan Research Institute, which is a private company. And today, I am talking about the from theory and strategy to actual impact from the perspective of the practitioner, because I am not the academia researcher. I am working actually on creating the impact via impact investment and also the ESG investment. So let me briefly introduce my companies, my team, and my works first. The Japan Research Institute is a research and consulting service company as well as a Japanese major think tank. So we provide that policy recommendation to our not only for the central government, but also the local government. As the research and consulting business, we cover that almost all industries, and most of the unique things of the Japan Research Institute is that we are the think tank, but we also a do tank, which means that we own creates a new business. So we sometimes spin off like the startups from our organization. So my team actually is belonging to the incubation division, which means that the core element of our do tank function. So this is just briefly talk about the example, what kind of that incubation projects are right now going on, or that what the cutting edge type of the business mean for us. So for example, in order for the solve the agriculture workers issues, especially in Japan, most of them are really elderly people. So we developed the agriculture robot. Actually, in 2 years ago, we launched this agriculture robot in the market. So now we spin off this business, and they started as a startup, and they started their new journey. So for the elderly care, we are now providing the avatar system for the nursing care home. This is just the elementary kind of experimental type of the project, so which means that we are not at the process of finalizing our service to create the avatar of the elderlies. And last one is that we also pursue that how the end users can reduce their CO2 emission. So in order for towards that the carbon neutral world, one of the team is working hard together with the retailers to reduce the carbon emission by end user. So, and what my team is right now is doing is that, firstly, our team actually have engaged in ESG analysis field more than 20 years. So most of our team members has rich experiences in analysis of the ESG data information of the listed companies in Japan. So based on this ESG analysis experience, we are now doing the impact measurement and management services mainly to the banking corporation, venture capitalist, as well as a larger corporation that would like to measure their business impact. So talking upon the impact measurement and management service, again, we provide the impact measurement and IMM execution support to the venture capitalists and also their investees and larger corporation. And also that we support impact due diligence. And for the banking corporation, we support them to develop the ESG-based loan product. So impact-based loan product, sustainable finance, that kind of the product. If that the banking corporation would like to develop, we support them to design the product and develop the product and launch the product. So today, based on those experience, I would love to share with you that. Sorry, before that, the last year, the Sumitomo Mitsui Financial Group, which is my company's parent company, launched its own impact investment fund, which means that it was actually the first impact investment fund launched by the mega bank in Japan. So Japan Research Institute team supported them to design the impact investment fund, and also that how they calculate or measure that impact beforehand the investment, and also that during the investment period. So right now we are also supporting them to conduct the impact due diligence before they invest. And today, I would like to briefly share what I am thinking, and I am supporting those stakeholders involved in the impact investment and also the impact measurement. So actually, I also can understand a lot of the theory and the metrics are discussing in the globally, especially the academic world. But talking about the business practices, most of them has, like I can say, the difficulties in understanding the theory and the strategy. So as a think tank, I can say we translate the academic research into the business practices words. So firstly, I would love to briefly share with you that what frameworks and the tools are being used by the impact investors or the banking corporations in Japan, and then how do the investors and the banks utilize the impact measurement and management protocol. And thirdly, I would like to share my own perspective that how much can investors and banking corporation contribute to scaling the impact, especially the social impact. And lastly, I just would like to introduce the initiatives to further expand impact in Japan. I understand half of the participants of this session are Japanese, so that probably you may know these initiatives, but for the participants from the other countries, it may be interesting for you to look around these initiatives. So talking about the frameworks and the tools used in Japan, most of the impact investors, banking corporation prefer to utilize the SDGs as a framework. And secondly, more than half of them prefer to utilize the impact management project, IMP. Actually, my clients and also the Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation utilize IME when they measure the impact and also the report the impact. Suddenly, some of the venture capitalists try to conduct the OPIM, Operating Principle for Impact measurement. But I think that the talking about numbers of the venture capitalists, they have already conduct the OPIM is not so many. So, but a lot of the banking corporation banking corporation as well as venture capitalists now focusing more on the how they can conduct the OPIM. Talking about the metrics, probably the IRIS catalog and also the IRIS Plus core metric set, they're very famous globally, of course in Japan as well. But discussing with my clients, actually IRIS itself, it's a little bit difficult for them to utilize fully. One of the reasons is that some of the catalogs and some of the metrics are not fit in the Japanese social context, they feel, so that they prefer to create their own impact metrics when they start their impact investment. And how do the investors, banks, and utilize impact measurement and management protocol? Most of them prefer to utilize the impact measurement in order for monitoring and evaluating the potential for expanding their impact of their portfolio company's business. So most of the impact investors right now has capacity to develop their own impact metrics, but maybe I can say before 2 years ago, it's really hard for them to develop their own impact metrics. So utilizing the existing metrics and also the frameworks, they just monitor and evaluate the impact. But right now, they proactively try to evaluate the potential investees in order for expanding their social impact. And then the secondary, the investors would love to conduct the impact measurement in order to enhance the functionality of boards of directors at investee companies and improve organizational capability. So I can say that for the venture capital fund or the banking corporation, the second one is like the engagement for their investee company. So this is the most of the venture capitalists and also the banking corporations, the reason why they prefer to utilize the IMM. And my client as well, my clients also prefer to utilize IMM because they regularly monitor and evaluate the impact. And also when they discuss with their investees, they firstly understand the current impact level that their investees are created on ground. So based on those reasons, they are conducted the impact measurement and management. And from the practitioner's perspective, how much can investors, banks contribute to scale impact? That is really important, but very difficult to question. So I just would love to share that in order to scale up the impact, there is some necessary conditions. One is that the investors need to discuss potential investment and IMM using the logic trees or other method to describe their impact. And also that they need to develop the quantitative metrics. But most of them has a lot, I can say the lack of the capacity is really hard for them to develop the quantitative metrics by themselves. So narrative one is right now is measure to talk about the investment with their investees. And the second one is also that the very serious issues, which is that whether the investees or investors have a reasonable baseline of data and information for evaluate the impact. And most of them prefer to look at the impact comparing to look at the financial performance. And lastly, of course, in order to scale up the impact, it is crucial that investment target or investees in impact-driven business body, that company. And also the most challenging things is that monitoring survey of outcomes. That is very challenging for both investees and investors. And we are now trying to overcome these challenges with our clients. And this is just a brief introduction. In Japan right now, we have the Impact Consortium founded by the FSA and the Ministry of Economics. And we have the 4 working groups in the consortium, and most of the impact investor focusing on the working group 1, data and metrics, and also the working group 2, market research and development. I myself is now applying to be the member of the working group 2, but unfortunately I don't have any response from the Secretary Office of the Impact Consortium. So once I can join the working 2, I would love to share our own business practices in order for promoting the market research and development in near future. All right, so just a brief discussion from myself. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much to our speakers. And I know with our revised timeline, we might have a little bit of movement within our own panel. Although I prepared questions, I know that Dan has actually a specific question to Tamako. And so if you don't mind, perhaps we can start the panel off this way. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you very, very much for that. Fabulous presentations by both of you. I greatly appreciate it. Tamako, just a very specific question. I had the privilege of going to Vietnam in November last year to attend green banking conferences there and to give presentations to bankers there. And alongside that, I did attend a number of agricultural sustainability projects with farmers and cooperatives and companies. And a common question kept coming out from both groups, and that was who is responsible for assurance? So they were trying out, I know Japanese organizations are heavily involved in helping Vietnam learn about how to meet their government's requirements. But of course, the general views were all different. The clients saying, well, we can't afford it. The bankers saying, we can't fund this. And the government clearly can't cover off the costs of everyone. And any thoughts on that, especially given the investigation you've been spending on the usefulness of these impact frames?
Thank you so much, Dan. That is really important and rare questions. When we talk about the impact measurement framework, for example, most of my clients as a business practitioner, which means that private company, they prefer to have the impact measurement frameworks, which has already established and utilized by the government or the other companies, not in Japan, but also in abroad. But on the other hand, they also prefer to create and develop their own impact measurement metrics because for example, talking about the global level large company, for example, they understand that they need to create impact metrics which is related to their own ESG metrics. And sometimes they have set of the ESG metrics on the right-hand side. And for them, the ESG metrics is really like the long history type of that tools for them. So they don't want to change it drastically. That's why they need to create their own impact metrics, because they don't want to import them from especially the outside of the company. So sometimes it's really hard to fit the impact metrics as well as the ESG metrics. But for that question to you, right, I can also say that we need to see like the time frame when we talk about the impact metrics or impact measurement. Most of the Japanese client right now just is seeing that longer term impact measurement period. So I can see that unlike the venture capitalist, the impact investment by that corporation can fit like the pure impact principle to be pursued.
Thank you for that. Hannah, I must apologize. I must race off just now. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you so much, Dan, and thank you for Tamako for answering that question. I do have one question. Perhaps I could ask Professor Ito as well as Ms. Watanabe, and Dan, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so it was interesting listening to all of the presentations because I think for many of us, we kind of have an understanding of the academic theory, but also quite a bit of interaction with those on the ground, so practitioners. And sometimes we do see that tension there. So when I was doing a bit of research on the ground, so talking with institutional investors, not all, but these are, traditional, maybe not impact investors, but those that are kind of traditional, we would think is mainstream for-profit institutional investors. When I was speaking to them before, it's a little dated, I think they mentioned that they think they have at least access to some key non-financial data. And so they think they have that, whether it's externally or they prepare something in-house or it's a combination of both. But for managers, they found that a difficulty was figuring out what to do with the data. So you have it, but the challenge was not so much the absence of data, but how we apply the data. And again, this is maybe different from the case of impact investors, where that's the key data that they need. So I'm wondering, Professor Ito, as well as Tamako, based on the work that you're doing, do you find that we have enough data, both in terms of quality and quantity? And the challenge is how you can link that with the application of data. Or do you think we still face significant challenges when it comes to accessing and collecting and quantifying the data? Perhaps we can start with Professor Ito.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So your question, let me clarify your question. So your question is from the view of the investors, right?
Yes.
Like traditional investors. Okay. From the view of traditional investors, actually they have the data now. So many corporations disclose many types of information, many types of data. But however, as I mentioned in my presentation, so even the corporate disclose non-financial data, sustainability data, so these information is not linked to their corporate strategy. So they just disclose information only. So it means that if they do not use this sustainability data for their strategy or corporate business, it means that it's, that doesn't make sense. These information linked to the corporate value. So from the investor side, actually this sustainability information is not necessarily linked to the corporate value or financial returns or even risks. So as you said, the quantity is okay, but the next step is corporation has to seriously consider about the strategy and what purpose of the corporation, then how they make business more profitable by pursuing the sustainability. So that would be the key issues from the view of the investor side. So once again, so of course they have to think about how to use that data, but corporation first think how to use that data for their business.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much. And perhaps, Tamako, you can add some comments as well.
Thank you so much. Talking about that baseline data and information, yes, Hannah, I totally agree with you. It's really hard to capture the baseline data always. And probably we have two different type of discussion here. One is that ESG investment. The other hand side, we have impact investment. So talking about the impact investment, when I designed the impact metrics for impact investors, in most cases, they don't have any baseline data and information. So they have, even if they have already started investment, I support them to create a baseline information and data set first. So most of them are quantitative one, but as Dan talked about, I also think that narrative type of the information is really important to understand how much impact the target users feel about. So we set two types of the metrics: quantitative, qualitative, in the baseline information. So, but talking about the ESG analysis, there's a lot of more than 20 years of the history in Japan. So ESG analyst company, they build up their own database. In my company, we also have that data set of the ESG data, so we can utilize the ESG data as a baseline. So before talking about the ESG investment and the ESG impact, for us at least, it's not so difficult to understand how much delta we can see.
Okay, wonderful. And we have perhaps a few minutes, Philip. If there are any questions, I'm sure that there are some on the ground. So perhaps I can toss over to you briefly.
Yes, so just if we have, sorry, I just turned on my camera, so let me switch that back on. We do have a full room here. So any questions from anybody in the room? Or any questions from the online audience before we wrap up? Yes, Jim.
Hello. Is it on? Okay. When you talk about the ESG data disclosed by corporations, Tamako, you said they have historical precedent and they want to keep what they're disclosing. I guess my question, a loaded question, is why they want to do that. And in my opinion on that is that so much resources have going into getting those that data disclosed, but not for the benefit of society, but to get into high profile ESG indices. So, what we see is that in East Asian companies getting included in a Dow Jones Sustainability Index or an MSCI Global ESG Leader Index, or getting into any of the 9 indices that the GPIF tracks. If you notice, you'll see Japanese corporations listing on their websites that they list that we are in this fund which the GPIF tracks. It's a very proud moment for Japanese companies to be in any of the GPIF indices or any of the famous ESG indices. So I don't know if it's for a historical reason. I think of it as marketing reasons more than anything. I don't know if you feel differently than that.
Okay, thank you, Jim, to rate up the questions. Firstly, I would like to say that there is two different discussion again. Probably you mentioned about the ESG investment, right? And that I also mentioned about impact investment, which targets the unlisted corporation, mainly the startups. So the impact investors has their own impact metrics, or I can say they prefer to have their own impact metrics. And those impact metrics, some part of metrics cover the ESG things, but mostly they are focusing on the impact which are created through their products and the services. And so which means that, for example, and also the ESG investment, ESG analysis targeted the listed company, I can say the larger companies per se, so that they need a different type of the communication to the investees, right? And talking about the social and the environmental impact that startups or the entrepreneur is now facing is really, it's really quite new, and that impact itself sometimes very, very small. So in order for the assess the impact, Again, the venture capitalists need to create their own impact metrics to capture correctly that impact that their potential investee as well as their existing investees are right now addressing.
Well, I'm very sorry to have to cut short this discussion, but we're running very close to being out of time. So Hannah, can I turn it over to you just to help us wrap up this session? And is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much again for helping to organize this panel, and also to all of our speakers for joining us today. I think there were some additional questions as well in the chat. And so perhaps what we can do, and Philip, perhaps you can help facilitate. I think all of our panelists would be happy to share presentation materials and or contact information so that we can continue this discussion afterwards. And I think that aligns really well with the kind of the driving kind of a pillar and momentum behind the Valuism Conference is that this isn't just a one-off kind of presentation, but we would like to continue that dialogue moving forward. And so I'd like to thank the speakers, our panelists once again, everyone who participated by listening and asking very insightful questions. Thank you again to Professor Philip Sugai and your team for putting together this conference together. And I would like to wrap up the second panel for today. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So for everyone on the Zoom room, we will be taking about an hour lunch break. So please be back here. I would say 1:15. So we'll start about 5 minutes later than in the schedule, but 1:15. For people who are here in the room, we again have lunch available downstairs, but you're free to find other facilities as well if you would like. So I'll put the menu up on the screen again, just